Good morning, pre-calc. Let's look at section 4.5. Other, trig, graphs. Section 4.5. The other trig graphs. We talked about sine and cosine. Let's talk about the other ones. First off, let's look at sine and cosine because we're going to need to use them to find the other graphs. So sine. And hopefully by now you've drawn this about 100,000 times. So there's 0, there's pi over 2, there's pi, there's 3 pi over 2, and there's 2 pi. Okay, I wish I'd drawn that a little bigger, but I think it'll suffice. And then we'll do cosine. Now I'll actually draw this one a little bigger. Like I should have drawn the other one. There we go. Back up to the top. So there's 0, there's pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, and 2 pi. And you can't draw these graphs enough. They're incredibly important all the time. So there they are again, sine and cosine. And what we're going to do is we're going to use these graphs to find the other graphs. So let's start with tangent. And let's use this identity. Tangent x equals sine x over cosine x. Okay, tangent is the value of sine divided by the value of cosine. So let's go ahead and start. The same points are going to be important. The 0, the pi over 2, the pi, 3 pi over 2, and 2 pi. Okay, we're going to use those same values. Let's start at 0. Sine of 0 is 0. Cosine of 0 is 1. So 0 divided by 1 is 0. So what I'm doing is I'm just doing the operation there between those two values. Okay, I plug in 0 for x, and that'll give me the value for tangent. Let's go ahead to pi over 2. At pi over 2, sine is 1, and cosine is 0. 1 divided by 0 is a vertical asymptote. So this is already not working out too well. Let me see. Let's go to pi over 2. We're going to have a vertical asymptote. So what is the graph doing here? Well, between 0 and pi over 2, we have a positive number divided by a positive number. So this is going up and then up against that vertical asymptote. Next at pi, let's do it again. Sine 0 divided by -1, that's 0. Okay, so we see the graph of tangent doing this. Now, if you remember from before, we said tangent has a period of pi, so this is going to keep repeating. Okay, this is going to keep repeating. We're going to have another vertical asymptote at 3 pi over 2. And there's your graph of tangent. I actually graphed 2 periods there of tangent. So if it asks the graph, just keep that in mind. Tangent, the period of tangent is half of what the other ones are. It just repeats itself quicker. Okay, let's look at cotangent. And that's going to be cosine over sine. Okay, that's going to be the reciprocal of tangent. And using the same process, it's going to look very similar. Cotangent and tangent are just a phase shift of each other, just like sine and cosine are. So starting at 0, if you plug in 0, you get cosine of 0 is 1, sine of 0 is 0, so 1 over 0. That's undefined, so you have a vertical asymptote at 0. And then at pi over 2, cosine over sine, 0 over 1 is 0, and it was positive there. And so the same kind of pattern is going to repeat. It's going to look like it's mirrored compared to tangent. So at pi, we're going to divide by 0. That's another vertical asymptote. At 3 pi over 2, That's going to be 0 again. And at 2 pi, another vertical asymptote. So there are your graphs of tangent and cotangent. Okay. We have a couple more. We have secant and cosecant. Okay, and secant, if you'll recall, is 1 over cosine. So I need to look at the cosine graph and do the reciprocals of those values. So let's see. Okay, I'm going to sneak up a cosine. 0, what's the reciprocal of 1? What's 1 over 1? Well, that's just 1. Okay, what's 1 over 1? That's just 1. Okay, next is pi over 2. Next is pi over 2. And at pi over 2, it's 0, so the reciprocal of 0, 1 over 0, is undefined. It's a vertical asymptote. As the numbers get very close to that, like 0.001, the reciprocal of that is 1,000. So this graph for secant is going to go up, 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 and away. So there we go. And I'm using a little bit of knowledge by drawing that flat there. Previous knowledge. Let's go to 3 pi over 2. And what's happening there? Let's look at cosine. The m, let me see, at 3 pi, oh, I'm sorry, pi is next. At pi, it's -1. What's the reciprocal of -1? 1 over -1 is -1. So at -1, it's going to be there. Now, if you consider between pi over 2 and pi, between pi over 2 and pi, it's always negative. It's always negative. Okay? So this has to go off in this direction. At 3 pi over 2, we also have 0 here, so 1 over 0 is another vertical asymptote. And the graph is again going to go down like that. Finally, at 2 pi, the value of the graph again is 1, like it was at 0. It's going to repeat. The period is 2 pi. So at 2 pi, it's 1, and 1 over 1 is 1. So there'll be a point right there at 1, and there is your graph of secant x. It's a little funky. Last one is cosecant. And cosecant is 1 over sine of x. Okay, to graph this one, let's look at the sine graph. And the first thing, I'm going to be a little more constructive here. Let's look at sine. Anywhere where it's 0, I'm going to do 1 over 0. That'll be a vertical asymptote. So at 0, pi, and 2 pi, I'm going to have vertical asymptotes. Because I'm dividing by 0 at those points. It's 1 over whatever that value is. So at 0, pi, 2 pi, there are vertical asymptotes. And what's happening in the middle? Well, let's see. At pi over 2, the graph is at 1. So the reciprocal of 1 is 1. At 3 pi over 2, it is -1. The reciprocal of -1 is -1. And this is going to look like this. And there you go. There's the graph of cosecant. So those are your now your 6 trigonometric graphs. Woohoo! Yeah, Cool.